Immigration has always been a prominent part of U.S. history, with the old immigration period, 1800 to 1850, the new immigration period, 1865 to 1920, and modern-day immigration. Today, I, Weston Coleman, will be covering immigration from Greece in the new immigration period, and modern-day immigration from Syria. The majority of Greek immigrants came to the U.S. in 1900 to 1920 due to poor conditions in Greece. At the time, Greece was going through an economic depression unlike any other, with currents, Greece's chief export, declining in value, thus putting many Greeks into poverty. Greece had also been incredibly late to industrialize, with about 80% of the population still living rurally in 1879. Many of the immigrants also emigrated from Greece because of the many opportunities in the United States. For example, the immigrants could provide for families who stayed in Greece and find jobs that were scarce in their homeland. But the voyage to America was treacherous, with many of the immigrants being transported in the steerage, the part of the ship below deck that had little access to clean air and was small and cramped. Disease was rampant, and some died on the journey. When immigrants arrived at New York City, the first thing they saw was the New York City skyline and the Statue of Liberty, which brought wonder and amazement to their eyes. When they first got to Ellis Island, they were met by a physician who judged if they were well enough to enter the country or if they had to be detained for further medical examination. About 20% of immigrants were detained, but only 2% were later deported. When they passed through Ellis Island, their lives as Americans began. The Greeks usually worked and settled in either textile mills in Massachusetts, copper and coal mines in Utah and Colorado, or with railroad gangs in California. In these jobs, they were frequently taken advantage of by padrones, labor brokers who gave immigrants work in exchange for their wages. Finally, in the early 20th century, they changed businesses and moved to the food industry, with restaurants and food carts. The restaurants served native food to fellow Greeks, and the food carts sold inexpensive food to the laboring factory workers. When Chicago, one of Greek immigrants' primary habitual locations, banned the sale of food on the street, they turned to permanent restaurants, using family for labor, which then in turn made them require little startup money. The restaurant business soon became their first stable source of income. By 1919, 1/3 of the restaurants in Chicago had Greek ownership. Another way the Greek community settled was through church. 130 Orthodox churches were in the country by 1918. These were built through funding from local community organizations. Through this, Greek immigrants influenced and bonded with American society. Today, Syrians are facing crisis in their homeland due to terrorist groups such as Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Their country is war-torn, and scores of people die every day. This has caused many of them to become refugees and emigrate to mainly Europe and the United States, who have both religious freedom and are not being destroyed through war. To get to the United States, Syrians have to go through many hardships. First, Syrians have to make the treacherous journey through the Aegean or Mediterranean seas. Almost all the time, the journey is made on small, poorly made, inflatable plastic vessels that are filled to the brim with refugees that have had to pay an arm and a leg to get onto the boat at all. The crossing can last days, with little to no food or fresh water. Many times, the vessel capsizes during the voyage, resulting in death for everyone on board. If refugees survive the trip, they land in either Italy or Greece. The Syrians must then wait for days to weeks to months or even years on end to gain passage into this country. They must then raise enough money for themselves and their families to take a plane to America, where they must apply for asylum and hope that their case is admitted. To be admitted, they must go through a vetting process, where biographical and biometric checks are used to conduct thorough background checks and verify the identity of the refugee. Once the Syrian is allowed asylum, they usually move to Los Angeles, Allentown, Pennsylvania, or Houston, where there is already a significant amount of Syrian immigrants. They moved to these places to ease integration, but there are still significant problems. People in the United States sometimes actively abuse the Syrians, both verbally and physically, based on their appearance and ethnicity. But they persevere, working like any other, in jobs like any other, fighting to be like any other.